we like to welcome each one of you for this live Beyond COVID-19, a special talk by none other than Mr. Shekhar Vishwanath, who was our former president BCIC and a former vice chairman and a whole-time director of Toyota Kirloskar Motors. And this session is being organized under the aegis of the BCIC Leadership Forum. And this is our ninth in the series that we have been organizing under our president of Mr. T.R. Parshuram. And also, we are happy to inform all the participants that this is our 125th event happening today. Mr. Shekhar Vishnath will address on the implication of COVID-19, impact on industry and business, transformation, work-life balance. So I request all the participants to kindly mute their mic and webcam option. I request only the speakers to be on live. This will help us for the bandwidth and there's unwanted disturbance. Request all the participants to pose their questions. Also like to thank all the participants for joining today's session. I request our president, Mr. T.R. Parshuram, to kindly do the welcome address. Sir. Over to you, President, sir. Hello. Request our president, Mr. T.R. Parshuram, to kindly welcome the gathering and introduce today's evening session speaker. Over to you, President, sir.
Thanks, Prithvi. First of all, I extend a very hearty welcome to all of you for the leadership session we have planned with Mr. Shekhar Vishwanathan, the former president of BCIC and the ex-vice chairman of Toyota India, Toyota Kirloskar Motor. So first of all, sir, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to spend your valuable time with us today. So you'll be talking today on the topic life beyond COVID-19, both from the corporate perspective and also from the work-life balance point of view. So Mr. Shekhar Vishwanathan, all of us know that he has been a visionary leader and he is very active in the corporate life. He has an illustrious career of 20 years plus with Toyota Motor Corporation and the Toyota Group in India, and he has been responsible for several functions: finance, human resources, legal functions, external affairs, to name a few. So a chartered accountant with exemplary knowledge of the industry and financial services. He had the distinction of holding leadership positions in the prestigious industrial associations like CII, ACMA, BCIC, SIAM, and FICCI. He began his career in 1981 with Unit Trust of India, then moved to Chase Manhattan Bank, later to Lazard Brothers. He was associated with Aldia Petrochemicals, a US $2 billion petrochemical enterprise. Sir, today the topic is very, very relevant in the current situation, especially we are just battling with the wave 2 and nobody knows what is next and when this is going to end. And currently the situation is so bad. Hello? You're able to hear me?
Yep.
Thanks. I think the situation is so bad and we don't know what next. What is the next thing that's likely to happen? It has affected us both from a personal point of view, from a stability point of view, from a work-life balance point of view, and also as an economy. I think we had a huge challenge. We're just trying to come out of it. And again, we are hit by wave 2. And now we are talking about wave 3 in October. So every area, right from the education, the kind of manufacturing, the banking, financial sector, I think every sector, it had its own dent. And of course, there are lots of learnings through COVID-19. I think several learnings that we learned, which definitely we can take it forward. So today, with this background, I invite Mr. Shekhar Vishwanathan to share his valuable thoughts with us in today's leadership forum. Over to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Sir, you are on mute, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having invited me for this event. Thank you, Parshuraman, for that introduction. And without much ado, let me get into what I have prepared as a talk to you all, and let me get it off my chest, so to speak. When I was initially requested to give this talk, I first thought I would pontificate on the merits of the government action and that of the public in tackling this pandemic, the various sins of commission, omission that government is guilty of, that state governments are guilty of, that various stakeholders are guilty of, etc. And also the attitude of politicians towards this menace, or even that of the Aam Aadmi's behavior in negotiating the scourge called COVID-19. But as I thought through it, I realized that what the various governments, both at the state and the center, have done or not done, and our debating the merits and demerits of their action will not serve much purpose, because the time for recrimination is not now. I will now move to giving a slightly political angle to this discussion. People can vote based on what their assessment of what the ruling government in their states have done or not done, what the center has done or not done. The politicians will fight their battles to win the vote with an eye on the state elections next year. And
that most people complain.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah, people can vote based on their assessment of what the ruling government has done or not done, both at the center and the state. And next year there will be the elections coming up in different states, and followed into 2024 with the elections to the Lok Sabha. And there will be always vociferous people strewn across the political spectrum to say one thing or the other, to side with one political formation or the other. But I will not want to talk about the politics of the pandemic, simply because it doesn't serve any purpose. We are all going to vote based on our perception of how it's affected us, based on our perception of how we think the government has handled this issue plus various other issues, and that will be the net result. But let me share with you one story that I'm fond of telling, which relates to Mr. Winston Churchill. As you all know, Winston Churchill was instrumental in leading England to a great victory in the Second World War. His leadership qualities and his speech, Blood, Sweat and Tears, really motivated and moved people. And he eventually, though his government was a caretaker government, he won the war for England. But what happened in the election? Despite winning the war, he lost the election. And I think that is something that we would all do well to keep in mind, because people do get tired of continuous suffering. And if all the visuals that we see of hospital beds and people sharing oxygen cylinders, etc., is to have really penetrated, then I do think all the suffering could also translate into people just getting fed up, despite whatever the government may do or may have done. That's one viewpoint. But on the flip side, if things were really so bad, if things were going steeply downhill, I can't explain at the same time this mad rush for religious festivals, religious gatherings, social gatherings. Sometimes marriage ceremonies are flouted. The norms of 50 people at a wedding is just violated on the specious plea that, oh, we have a much bigger area and therefore we can have more than 50 people there, etc., etc. So if things were really bad, would people can behavior change? At the end of the day, I'm only convinced of one thing: human nature being what it is, both scenarios are possible. And therefore, let me now move on to what we can do. We are men and women from industry and commerce. And what is it that we can do? Forget the politicians, forget the other people. What is it that we can do as as men of industry and commerce to revive the economic situation? Because the direct fallout of this pandemic is the deteriorating economic conditions. Of course, those of you who are active participants in the stock market will say there is no such thing as the economy going down. Look at what the stock market is doing. It's going places, and therefore, where is the question of an economic downturn? Now, I do think that there is one point that I would like to make straight off the bat over here, and that relates to why is the stock market doing so well? I think one of the first things that I would like to point out is that a lot of the companies that actively engage in commerce and industry have been indirect beneficiaries of this pandemic, in as much as they've been able to cut a lot of costs. Some of it has been planned, some of it has been occasioned by circumstance. But the net result has been the cost structures of various companies has changed, mostly to the advantage of the companies, but in some cases to the disadvantage of companies as well. And I think, therefore, from that perspective, the stock market has been doing well. And the anticipation is that when things do get better, when the virus recedes, things will be hunky-dory, and therefore there is a huge thumbs up being given to the various companies being quoted on the stock exchanges. But what about MSMEs? But what about the working class people? Are they as happy as the individual companies are? The answer is obviously not. There is a lot of discontent, but is it all going downhill? I don't think so. But let me get into what I think are going to be the immediate effects of this COVID once the second wave recedes. Now, one of the things that I need to mention here is that the entire COVID scenario can keep changing. You will think you have it licked till a third wave comes along, and maybe a fourth wave, and maybe this will be never ending. We don't know. As of now, we can only hope that we've seen the last of it, and that the numbers will, or that the number of deaths will keep going down, the number of new cases will keep trending downwards, and that the number of recoveries will hasten. That is all that we can hope for as of now. But in such a scenario, or scenarios, because you can have it going down or going in the wrong direction, industry and commerce has still to survive, and industry and commerce still has to play a role in the financial fortunes of many of the entire country, I would say. First of all, I think is the issue of inflation. I do think that inflation is going to rear its ugly head, and the bad thing about inflation is it affects the poor much more than it affects the well-to-do and well-heeled. And I think this is something that we need to watch out for. In which case, it is our immediate workforce that will be affected. And therefore, the kind of changes I see happening is that there will be a great emphasis on workforce well-being. I do anticipate that labor laws will change, and labor laws will change to the extent that there will be a mandatory uh, uh, stricture being passed on on industry and commerce to say, for example, before you can start production, make sure you have a functioning 15-bed hospital for every 250 people that you employ. And that 15-bed clinic or hospital or whatever you would choose to call it has not only to cater to the employees and their families, but it also should cater to the community surrounding you in case the need arises. I do expect this to become law to some extent. The other thing that we may have to contend with is the frequent bouts of panic that may come through as and when we have a third wave and a fourth wave and a fifth wave, if it happens. And I think containing this panic is what industry and commerce will have to apply its mind to. We can't simply take the view that it's okay, the third wave will also recede like the second wave did and the first wave did. The third wave may be much worse than the second wave has been. And second wave, we all know, has been much worse than the first wave. That's a fact. And therefore, this is something that industry and commerce will need to address. The other aspect which has been talked about in different fora, but is not, but my view is, and this relates to the mental health and well-being of the workforce. And I think here the industry and commerce and companies need to play a bigger role, particularly for tier 2, tier 3 and MSME companies, in making sure that the mental health and well-being of the entire workforce and the supply chain is kind of addressed. Deterioration in mental health cannot be ruled out, but it needs to be addressed, and we need to get ready for it today. The reason why I lay so much emphasis on this is, many of us have been cooped up in our homes. Now, all of us do not have the luxury of staying in commodious homes. There are workmen, employees I know, who have to share a room or share an apartment complex, 4 or 6 people in one flat. And therefore, in such situations, they are put to a lot of difficulty, and being cooped up will have an effect on mental health and well-being. So this is the other thing that we need to address. As I conclude on health infrastructure, I do see a lot of money being spent on insurance, on creation of health infrastructure, both by the private sector and by the government. And I do think that this will come to occupy a central place. At least the discourse will be on health and well-being for the next 3, 5, 10 years, or for as long as it takes. Now, some of it, the one important thing that we need to understand is, it's all very well to create facilities, to create, for example, oxygen cylinders. We didn't need it in the first wave, but in the second wave, we needed it. And therefore, there is a hue and cry now as to why oxygen cylinders are not available. But the important thing to note is that once you create such infrastructure, you may or may not utilize it. There may or may not be a need for it in the third wave, fourth wave, or fifth wave, if and when it happens. It may never happen. So you're also going to see a lot of dead investment happening in the health infrastructure. You may create beds which go unutilized. And here I see an opening for the hotel industry. I don't see the hotel and tourism industry doing that great over the next 5 years. I do believe some of the hotels or the hotel rooms could get converted into this health and well-being clinics, or it could be dual purposed, depending on the infrastructure available and how it can play out. I don't think the tourism industry is going to do very well, simply because while people may want to travel, it will not reach the peak that it could reach, simply because of fear, particularly if a third and fourth and fifth wave happens. But if this is the peculiar phenomenon about human behavior and human nature. The longer the interval between two waves, the bolder humankind will get, and the more will be the urge to go out and spend money, etc. To go on holidays, to go on leisure tours. But if that interval gets shortened, then naturally the whole thing will cave in. And therefore, while the existing infrastructure may be revisited and maybe souped up, I don't see fresh hotel infrastructure coming on. And therefore, how is it going to affect the real estate industry? I do think that with the emphasis on work from home, and I think this is a concept that we're all familiar with by now, and we have read about it so much, so I won't labor the obvious. I do think that there will be an emphasis on work from home concepts, but not everybody is going to be able to work from home. And I do think what will happen on a very practical basis is it's the WeWork kind of concepts that will come up, where you go to where it'll be workstation related. You don't have to travel to your place of work every day, except maybe once a week or twice a week, based on the kind of job that you have. But what you will have to do is to go to a workstation. Either you can have that workstation installed at your home, or you can go to a workstation near your home and work from there. Both options will find favor. There is a cost attached to working at a workstation in a hired place. Working from home will mean that you can save on that cost, but then would industry and commerce be willing to share that saving with the employees? And that's the next part of the equation, which is going to unravel. In some cases, it has already taken root. I do know, for example, in UB City, some of the bigger companies are vacating the place and are encouraging work from home concepts, are encouraging workstation concepts, where you just go and hire the workstation and work from there. There will in many cases be a need to meet physically. For example, if you have to meet a customer, either at the showroom or meet a customer in government, you will have to do that. But I think those meetings will be few and far between. It will not be something that will become immediate. It will not be something that you will have to do every day. Not only from your perspective, but also from the government official's perspective or the customer's perspective, whether he be a retail customer or an institutional customer. I think the behavior will now be, we can do this on Zoom, or we can do this on WebEx, or we can do this on Google, or we can do this on Microsoft Teams. So I think that is going to be the order of the day going forward. As far as the effect on real estate prices itself is concerned, I don't think they're going to go down, but they're not going to go up either. But on an inflation-adjusted basis, I do think real estate prices are going to sag in the next 3 to 5 years. If they were already not in the best of health, and I think this is going to go down further. Again, I'm talking about an inflation-adjusted basis. On a nominal basis, you may see some bump ups, but that it's very difficult for me to say, or for anybody to say, as to how markets across India is going to play out. I do think there will be a lot of potential for the entertainment space because people still need to be entertained. And I think a lot of the entertainment will take place at home. And I do think there will be more opportunities for playing computer-based games, even if it were simulating the real world. I don't know how far physical games like basketball, swimming, etc., will take further root. It's very difficult to cast your mind and say, no, all these sports will come back and it will grow. In fact, we were getting ready to do a lot of swimming, but the third wave came and put paid to all that. Moving on to the airline industry, again, I don't see much of hope for the airline industry the way it is currently structured, both in terms of its costs and in terms of its capacity utilization. But I think this calls for a talk by an airline expert, and maybe I can only suggest to Mr. Parashuraman that the next leadership forum talk can be from somebody in the airline industry if you've not already had it, because I think it's a very capital intensive industry and it probably needs a special focus and attention. I think in terms of individual lifestyles, these lifestyles are going to change because we are now going to be much more homebound. While in an earlier era, we would just make a casual phone call and then visit somebody. I think now that's not going to happen that readily. Not because you're not being welcomed, but because you also want to make sure that your the person you intend visiting is in a state of readiness to receive you, and that he doesn't have any that he doesn't have a situation where it becomes embarrassing or difficult for him to receive you. So I think these kinds of behavior will play out, and I think we will all become that much more cautious. Will shopping, mall outings, etc., come back? I think it will come back, but it will not come back the way we have known it in the past. I think there will be a lot of hesitancy before that happens, particularly if there is a wave, and then you expect the malls to again reopen and be open for business 100%. I don't think that's going to happen. Oh yes, and I think one thing which I forgot to mention is inoculation could become an annual affair. We're now talking about having the first dose and second dose. But I do think that over time, based on the severity of the viruses and the way it's mutating, based on the medical answer to that, this could be an annual affair. I don't know the answer, and I don't think anybody in the medical world has the answer either. We hope it will not be an annual affair, but if it is an annual affair, I think there's going to be a complete different infrastructure being created for it. And I think the medical profession will be stretched to find a solution for this. Just that it will also, like, if there is a difficulty, there will also be opportunity. And I think there will be a lot of opportunity for wannabe medical professionals to find some space over here. Now, I do think that the heart of our industry in many ways is the MSME sector. And I do think that we need to spare a thought for how the MSME sector functions. One, of course, is that we need to encourage them and support them. First of all, I think big industry and government must make payments to them on time. And I think this is very, very important, particularly as we negotiate these pandemics. Second, of course, is they would need a lot of hand-holding and help in training their workforce. And some of the things that we've been doing with the MSMEs will continue to happen. Only thing, it requires a greater degree of urgency now. As far as other industries are concerned, I don't have any specific thoughts, and I would like to rest at this juncture and take any specific questions that any of you may have. I know one can go on and on a subject like this, but I don't think that's the point. I think the objective should be to have an informed discussion based on what kind of scenarios are likely to come up going forward. And I think the number of scenarios that are possible are too varied and too complex. We will have to be nimble, we'll have to think on our feet, and we have to be prepared. That's my short summary of how I think life after COVID is going to be.
Sir, thank you so much. I think you brought the big picture beautifully from multi-perspective. I think the financial background, the markets, the economy, the lifestyles, the various industries, health infrastructure, tourism. I think you touched upon very nicely the macro perspectives and the impact of this current pandemic and the way forward. Now I think we can raise some questions to Mr. Shekhar Viswanathan. I invite questions from the audience. Please raise your hand and we can take few questions in seriatim. We have around 10-15 minutes for the Q&A session. So we can deliberate some of the thoughts in this session. Sir, the first question, can I raise that point? You said that the financial market is not convinced of the current situation and they continue to shine. Of course, very interestingly, you said that the financial markets always look at the futuristic. They always ignore the current crisis. They always look beyond. So, sir, you think that the wave 4, it is likely, wave 3 is likely in October. We are talking about wave 3 for certain happening in the month of October. For a country like India, I think what would be the way forward for the kind of economical perspective and the financial markets going forward in the next 1 year you could see, sir?
Yeah, I think, irrespective of whether a wave 3 happens or not, and, I mean, this is, at this point in time, I'm only inclined to regard it as 50% an educated guess and 50% speculation. If it happens, there is one scenario that will unfold. If it doesn't happen, there is another scenario that will unfold. But what is common to both these scenarios is that inflation will rear its head in the next 6 months to 1 year. And I think that both as individuals and as corporates, we need to be acutely aware that inflation is going to rear its head, and what are the steps that we can take to contain it. There is not much that we can do. We just have to live with it. But let's also understand that the well-being of our workforce depends on our ability to meet at least the costs of living. And therefore, there is going to be a negative impact on the financials of the companies. So far, the stock market has not thought that way. The stock market is only looking at the fact that when this current wave recedes, companies will be much better off, capacity utilization will improve, and therefore their profitability will improve, which is one way of thinking and probably a good way of thinking. But that's where the conflict comes between inflation on the one hand and the reality of cost cutting on the other.
Sir, you talked about this interest rates. That is, when the inflation goes up, what is the likely scenario of interest rates in the next 2 to 3 years, sir? You obviously there will be an increase in the rates of interest. So what will be
Yeah.
the number you are picking in actually, sir? Any kind
Well,
of
I don't know. I hope it doesn't go to double digits because that would make the cost of borrowing too prohibitive. But I do think if inflation does go up, and that is the anticipation not only in India but also I think overseas, particularly the US and has been talking about inflation happening. If it happens, interest rates will have no choice but to go up. You can't have interest rates lagging inflation. So I do think that's almost a given. But if it touches double digits, I think we're all in for some trouble. Particularly on the poorer sections of society, because inflation has this nasty habit of redistributing wealth, and therefore I think we need to watch out for this happening. What will then be of relevance to the poorer sections of society will be the availability of food grains, will be the availability of items of mass consumption, will be the availability of your cooking oil and then of course your transport needs. These will have to be taken care of and addressed separately. And I think the government will do its bit, but I think at the end of the day, all of us must realize that there's only so much that the government can do. I think at the end of the day, industry and commerce will have to do its bit for its employee and its workforce.
Thank you, sir. I think.
Parsu, can you go to the next question, sir?
Yeah. Now, so next, Shekhar, would you please take the question?
Yes.
Shekhar.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well. Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry I joined a little late because I had a conflict call. Sorry about that. But I just have 3 questions, sir. Actually, originally I had 2 questions. The last question I picked up from the last conversation of yours. The first question is your favorite industry, automobile industry. I was speaking with one of the automobile companies CEO today afternoon, and what he was mentioning is that the entire automobile industry, they're expecting a low sales in the last year, but after COVID, the sales got picked up because the entire shared mobility moved to personal mobility, and the industry sold 3 lakh cars the last year. And he was mentioning that after COVID wave 2, the industry expects still a lot more, auto industry expects still a lot more buoyancy, particularly in the small car and the mid-size car segments, not much in the premium car segments. So do you share that same sort of view, number one? And number two, a very interesting perspective came with one of the discussions which I had with one of the power company who were engaged in switch gears and the transformers. They said that the global companies will move to India for manufacturing on 2 conditions. Number one, ease of doing business in India should get significantly improved. And second one is that if it is going to be assembly or contract manufacturing or and not so much precision type of instruments where it can be manufactured, it can be moved. But wherever the instruments or the equipments need a lot more research and development, a lot more design, that sort of manufacturing cannot move into India for short-term perspective. Long-term it can come, but short-term it cannot move. That's the second point which I wanted to share. I want to check with your thoughts. And third point you raised are very valid, and you are the former president of BCAC, under whom I also worked as a chairperson, Direct Tax Expert Committee. So I can take liberty with you that going forward, earlier the Chamber of Commerce main job was to go to the government and make represent. We need this, we need this, we need this. Of course, BCAC was the exception. We are also working from a social perspective. But considering the fact this healthcare in India is going to be very critical, we may say wave 3, we do not know whether wave 4, now we are talking about the black fungus. I know whether brown fungus will come, God only knows. Now, what do you think the Chamber of Commerce like BCAC should do in the next 3 years? Forget about the representation that we are all capable of doing the represent because everybody has got a lot of requirements, so we collect all the thoughts and do that. But from a social perspective, because also important from a selfish perspective, because subject of Parasu agreeing, I may have to take it out from Parasu. So in the next 2 years, when I'm looking at a plan for BCSC, what is a change that Chamber of Commerce should do in the revised scenario, sir? I just wanted to pick up your thoughts on 3 questions. Sir.
Okay. Let me handle the easiest one first, which is the auto sector. I do share the view that there has been some pent-up demand, and therefore the volumes in the auto sector have gone up. And that has been primarily in the small car space. And I think that trend will continue for a bit longer. But is there going to be a secular shift in the demand curve for automobiles? I don't think so. For example, we are currently making about 4 million cars throughout India. I think Maruti itself has got a capacity of about close to 1.8 million. Hyundai has another 700 to 800,000. And the rest of the industry contributes the balance. Toyota has itself 300,000 and Honda has 300,000, I would think. I don't remember the numbers from Tatas and Mahindras. But anyway, this capacity is not going to increase for a couple of reasons. One is that the need for having so many cars or having an incremental amount of cars itself is not going to be justified. One, by the changed behavior pattern. For example, I told you about companies that have shifted out of UB City. They're not going to come back there because they would rather allow their employees to work from home. Dealerships may not exist the way we know it. Dealerships will typically say that, listen, a customer already has made up his mind as to what car he wants to buy because he's seen it on the internet. Our only job will be to give him a test drive. And that test drive, they can take the car to the customer's home, allow him to drive it, and then come to a conclusion. That is what I think is going to happen. So, there will be a knock-on effect on the kind of employment that dealerships will offer. And therefore, there will be this knock-on effect on employment, on the way cars are sold. For example, Tesla owns its dealer outlets. It doesn't franchise it the way the current auto industry has done. I don't think that this current volume of 4 million vehicles is going to grow anytime soon in India for these reasons. And also, which I've mentioned time and again, is that our tax structure militates against any expansion of volume. So I will leave it at that for now. As far as ease of doing business and assembly type operations, I think at the end of the day, the auto sector and indeed other companies will do what is best for their market share, what is best for their profit and loss account, and what is best for their balance sheet. They will invest money in India if they are convinced that they can meet the quality and volume parameters, if they can meet the regulatory requirements of the country where they are manufacturing, if they can meet the strictures imposed by labor laws, then they will go ahead and manufacture in India or in the country where they choose to manufacture. So ease of doing business is not just a slogan. I think it needs to be seen in a holistic manner, where you address each one of these parameters and see whether it makes sense for the company to come here and start manufacturing. For example, if the market is in India and Pakistan, and you can't sell from India to Pakistan or from India to Bangladesh, then the attractiveness of setting up a plant in India recedes to that extent. So I think there are, it depends on what the product is. It depends on how you want to go about doing this. I don't know whether I've answered that question in toto, but I do think that at the end of the day, it all depends on the product, and it depends on the economies of scale, and it depends on all these, regulatory reasons, the kind of volumes you can generate, and the kind of skill sets available in the country. Finally, coming to your question on BCIC and what we can do, I think BCIC will have to play a much more leadership role in telling the government very frankly as to what will work with industry and what will not. I know it's not going to be easy for the president of the day to go up to the government and tell them what to do, whichever government it is. It doesn't matter. But I think the job of the president of BCIC and the other office bearers and who will be supporting him will become more onerous as we go along. Not because the government won't want to listen, but they will also have difficulties because they will then have to sell it to a different constituency, and that process becomes more and more difficult. But I think BCIC will have to be much more honest, much more upfront, and be very, very direct with the government if both BCIC and the government has to succeed.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Ravindran, you have a question.
Good afternoon, Shekhar sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. This is Ravindran here.
Oh, yes, Ravindra.
We met about a year back and you were so kind enough to support us on the Startup Awards, which came out to be a triumphant affair. Thank you very much. You were the first Bangalore-based company to have come forward during a very difficult time. We're extremely grateful to you. I'm always a very strong admirer of yourself and have followed you very closely. I have an opinion and a question. Beyond the virus, there are a number of related economic risks to consider. A recovery that is slow or insufficiently robust could result in permanent scarring if too many firms go bust and labor markets start exhibiting what I call as hysteresis, which is if long-term unemployment renders some workers unemployable owing to erosion of skills, whether this is a likelihood. And the second thing is how much deleveraging there will be amongst highly indebted firms, both small and mid and large, and households also, and whether this effect will be fully offset by the release of pent-up demand as consumers spend their pandemic era savings. So this is what happened during the first term when people had time to save monies and then consume later, which led to a sharp GDP rise, companies doing well, and we thought this is the way things will be in India. So such a thing, do you think it will happen this time is a big question that I myself have. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, first on the employment issue, I think this risk is very real that there will be some kind of permanent unemployment resulting. I think this is going to lead, my own view is we are just too many people. And there will be unemployment in India. And it will hurt us. The political parties will always make tall promises saying, I will create so many jobs, etc. It is not for them to create jobs. It is for them to create conditions that will create jobs. And those conditions will be to not get in the way of industry and commerce. Lesser taxation is always preferable to more taxation. I'm yet to hear a politician say this. They are only worried about, their own budgets. Everybody in the GST council talks about the state share of revenue. But what about the share of private sector? what about the share of the consumer? If you lower taxes, and this is where the Laffer curve will play out, you will get more revenue for the government. If you encourage consumption, yes, your overall consumption of metals, consumption of oils, consumption of food grains will all go up in tandem. But for this to play out, I mean, I can understand they're not wanting to reduce taxes on luxury cars. That's understandable. And no one is even batting for that. But I think at the end of the day, there is no. I mean, for example, a two-wheeler. Why should it cost 28% GST, which is what it does today? So I think if India is to really grow, we need to cut back on taxes and allow a situation where the overall tax collections improve. And that's the only way you will keep unemployment at bay. If unemployment results, let me tell you, there's going to be a lot of social unrest. And this is what I'm afraid of. I don't have an answer other than the one that I've given you. And I know that this is not an answer that the politicians want to hear. Sorry, I don't know whether I missed any other part of your question.
I think we can take one or two.
It's okay.
questions,
Thank you, sir.
Before we wrap
Thank
up.
you.
Sir, I think one Mr. Kalyana Sundaram. Kalyana Sundaram, can you please raise your question?
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
Shekhar,
Yeah, go ahead.
can you
go
hear
ahead,
me? Yeah.
go ahead.
Yes.
Shekhar, thank you very much. I particularly came to attend this program. A very good talk from a professional point of view, something new for me to learn. But I'm particularly interested about the point you made about in the future, industries may need to have about 10-15 bedded provisions made in the industrial space. And just not about COVID, I'm looking at far ahead of COVID. Assuming over a period of time COVID does come down and we are getting free of it, maybe to a couple of years down the line, it still be a good investment and not like other dead investments we talked about. Because industrial health would depend on the health of the people who are part of the industry. And creating such an infrastructure at the COVID period would go a long way in mitigating the suffering of not only your workers and their families, as you very rightly said, in the community around them. I think it's a very good point that you made. I hope the industrialists around you will think of it and come forward, because we don't have to run around looking for places and beds in far off places away from where you are. I thought it was a good point you made, Shekhar. I wanted to endorse this view.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say it's a very good point you made, Shekhar. Thank you.
So, Dr. Jacob Rasta, can you please ask your question? Maybe the last question of the day before we wrap up.
Thank you, my president, and nice to see Shekhar once again. I'm Krasta here, sir.
Yeah, likewise, Krasta.
Thank you. Sir, I'm pleased that you made a point stating that if the payment is made for MSMEs on time, all these problems will go away. I fully agree with you. Major challenges MSMEs, especially during the COVID period, facing this kind of challenges or the delay in payment. Despite Modi also saying and requesting the India Inc. people to make the payment for MSME, even including the last year balance sheet which has been declared by ROC to make the payment is not come. Payment from government, state government or even central government requesting Nirmala Sitharaman to make the payment is not come. So since you raised this point of delayed payment for MSME, sir, is there any way all the chambers of commerce join together and make a suggestion to the government stating that, like the statutory payment, if the statutory payment is not paid, there is a penalty, there is an interest.
Yes.
Can there be a statute if the payment is not paid for MSME? That there will be a penalty. So that automatically from bank to bank can be transferred to MSME. Can this be possible? Sir?
Uh, Yeah, I think we can take it up with the government and make this suggestion. But I would request Mr. Shekhar and Mr. Parshuraman to have this examined in depth and to see, that whether statutorily enabling it would be feasible.
Sure.
Thank you.
Definitely.
And I think, sir, one more last, somebody wanted to raise a question. You talked about the mental health as a priority. What it means at family level, at the society level? So what is your thoughts on that? What is the impact at family level and at society level? Somebody has raised this question in the chat box. Would you like to answer, sir?
Yeah. See, I'm not a mental health expert, but what I do know, I mean, I'm not even remotely acquainted with some of the issues that mental health involves.
टाइम तो सभी का है, हमारा नहीं है, and we are doing this webinars, तो हम वेबिनार करते हैं, फिर यूटिलाइज योर टाइम इन द वेबिनार, और ऐसा कहते हैं कि reading a book is the best use of this quarantine, और honestly,
Sorry, Para, I'm not able to hear that gentleman very clearly.
Even I'm not able to hear. Sir, can you talk a little loudly? We're not able to hear you.
No.
Hello. Sir, can you talk a little bit loudly, sir? We are not able to hear you. Hello.
Also, his phone is muted. Probably you can request him to send the question in chat box, and then we can check it up with Shekhar later on.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
I can
I
give him a offline answer, but I think Dr. Kalyan Sundaram may be better positioned to talk on mental health and well-being.
I mean, if you want me to make a quick couple of minute comments, I think
Sure.
this is being increasingly recognized not only by the general public, but a lot of people who are dealing with issues concerning mental health. It has been shown repeatedly that both anxiety and depressions are on the rise during this pandemic. Not only because people are going through these issues, and it is also contributed by the fact that you mentioned that people are cooped up at home and with very little opportunity to go out and have a let off kind of an attitude. Secondly, those who are already with existing anxiety, panic, and depressions, and obsessive compulsive disorders, their symptoms seem to get worse. The frequency of the problems seem to increase. Most of them require additional medication and counseling happening simultaneously. In addition, those who are prone to stress, not yet broken down with the mental health issues, they seem to break down more frequently during this. This is a big topic in itself. I think Shekhar, you brought it out very, very, sensitively about this, because all industries and everybody else running programs or running operations, we have to be prepared to address this issue and have a sensitive people in the industry set up available, like a counselor who can pick up these symptoms early enough so that they don't get delayed in taking treatment. Earlier the treatment, better is the outcome.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, doctor.
Nice
Yeah,
perspective.
thanks, Shekhar.
Sir, I think we have come to the end of the session. I would like to sincerely thank Mr. Shekhar Viswanathan for sparing his valuable time. Sir, you have brought about fantastic perspectives of various 360 degrees, I would say, from various aspects, and what life would be, how corporates would behave, how economy will move, how the financial markets will adjust. I think it is a wonderful perspective, sir. I'm sure this session has added a lot of value to our members. And I'm sure Mr. Shekhar Viswanathan can always be contacted, so that I'm sure that you'll have some more questions. I would request you can always collate with BCIC, and you can always get it connected with Mr. Shekhar, and we will get the clarification at a later point of time. Once again, from BCIC, we're very thankful to you, sir. And we also welcome you to a new office in MG Road. Once the
Sure.
pandemic recovers.
I will
So we are
visit.
taking it.
I will visit.
Yeah, and Prithvi,
now-
can we have a closing ceremony, please?
Yeah, yes,
Just
President.
before that, President, sir, how are you spending your time after the hectic life in Sohit?
Well, lots of things. I won't say I'm busy, but I'm engaged. I have a few directorships, so that keeps me engaged. Plus, I play some bridge, and I'm now doing a lot of other reading, which is occupying my time.
Thank you.
I was playing golf, but last 1 month that has been out of the window.
Mr. Angmadal, you would like to say something?
Oh, sorry. I just, I was another call, business call. I just finished it. I heard from the last sentence I heard from Shekhar is that he was playing golf. He's
Yes.
the man who introduced BCIC golf event, right? I don't even call it a golf tournament, but so as long as BCIC golf is there, as long as I am the chairman, I can never forget Shekhar. Shekhar, thanks again for that.
Likewise, sir.
And
Likewise.
look forward to seeing you on the course very soon.
Yeah, all of us must get out as soon as is humanly possible.
Yeah, I'll see the recording. I couldn't join. Okay, I'll let.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you once again to all the participants and also specifically to Mr. Shekhar Vishwanathan for nicely compiling and sharing the thoughts, what's going to be beyond the COVID situation. Before we conclude, sir, we have a small a memento that we would like to give it to you virtually, and we will ensure that it reaches your home, sir. Pushpatham,
Oh my
can
God.
yeah. Pushpatham, can you play the virtual? President, sir,
Pardon?
can we have the national anthem played?
Yeah, of
Yes,
course.
please. I hope
So
it plays. I
yeah,
hope
let's
it
have
plays with me.
Huh?
Every time when you ask Parsu, ultimately we land up in singing. I hope it plays.
No, it will play, sir. That's it.
That's why the pokek is always there.
Yeah. What happened, Pushpatham?
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे तव शुभ आशीष गाहे तव जय गा जन गण मंगलदायक जय भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय जय
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you, sir.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, Shekhar.
Thank